Right, thank you for staying with your World on NTV this morning. We have been talking about the 2021-2022 national budget, which will be presented in Parliament on Thursday. But it's time to shift gears a bit and talk about your food, because it is World Food Safety Day and it matters. Now, in 2015, the World Health Organization, WHO, estimated that unsafe food causes 1 in every 10 people to fall ill every year, leading to 600 million cases of foodborne related illnesses and 420,000 deaths a year worldwide. The economic consequences of foodborne disease for countries are also significant. The World Bank estimates that approximately 110 billion shillings, of course, is incurred as that result. And that means, of course, we have to talk about your food, because if it's not safe, then it's not food. To talk to us and dissect today's conversation, I am joined in studio by Mr. Godfrey Nyangori, is the Food Safety Program Manager at the Micro Enterprises Support Program Trust. Welcome to the show, sir. Also joining me in studio this morning is Brenda Obura. She's the Head of Division of Food Safety at the Ministry of Health. Good morning, so Brenda. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Right, and joining us virtually this morning is Mr. Okisegere Ojepat, is the Chief Executive Officer at the Fresh Produce Consortium of Kenya. Mr. Ojepat, good morning and welcome to the show.
Morning, and thank you.
Yes, Dr. Charles Ochodo is also joining us virtually. He's the Head of Policy and Veterinary Governance at the Directorate of Veterinary Services in Kenya. Daktari, good morning and karibu.
Good morning and good morning, viewers.
Yes, and finally, we are also joined by Dr. Esther Kimani. She's the CEO at the Pest Control Products Board. Good morning, Daktari, and welcome to the show.
Good morning, viewers.
All right. Dr. Ochodo, let me just start with you. We have just, if it's not safe, it's not food. Talk to us about why this is important to not just me, not just to stakeholders, but also the government.
Thank you, Victor, and thank you for having me in the show. Food safety is everyone's business, and if it is not safe, it is not food. And this is because everyone needs food to live, to work, and to be healthy. In fact, it is said that if you miss food for 7 days, then you'll be dangerously nearing to losing your life. And one of the greatest philosophers, Hippocrates, did tell us that food is the greatest medicine. And I believe this is true because we need food to energize our cells, our tissues, organs in the body, and our food system, and our systems in the body. And a lot has been said by food, by different writers concerning food. For example, the Irish playwright, Dr. George Bernard Shaw, did say that there is no love sincerer than the love for food. And just that indicates the centrality of food in our lives. And another writer, Virginia Woolf, did say that if one needs to dine well in order to sleep well, love well, and even to think well. So food is an important factor in everybody's life. But coming to the government has a big stake in food safety because without safe food, then there is no food security. And people need food to work and to develop.
Okay.
And the government has demonstrated this in a number of ways. No less than 3 ministries are directly concerned with food safety.
Okay.
These are the Ministry of Agriculture, where we have the Directorate of Livestock Production, KEFIS, Agriculture and Food Authority, Kenya Dairy Board, just to name a few, and also the Directorate of Veterinary Services.
Okay.
We also have the Ministry of Health, where we have the Public Health Department. We have the Ministry of Industrialization and Trade, where we have a Kenya Bureau of Standards.
Okay.
And this just shows you the importance government attaches to food.
All right.
Because a lot of money and a lot of human resources is attached there. And this is a demonstration of that significance in our development agenda.
Okay.
Lastly, as government, we've also made it our business to interact with the rest of the world in matters of food safety. And so we are members of organizations like the World Health Organization that are concerned with food safety, the Food and Agriculture Organization. In fact, it is the two organizations that created this day,
okay,
the World Food Safety Day, way back in 2018.
Okay.
We are also members of international organizations like the World Organization for Animal Health, and these are organizations concerned with food safety, the International Plant Protection Convention in terms of plant health, which has also a safety factor, the Codex Alimentarius Commission that sets food standards, and the World Trade Organization that enables trade in food.
Okay.
Food is a huge commodity of trade, and we do see in markets all over, the supermarkets, the grocery shops, and so on, people buying a lot of food. In fact, in the supermarkets, what people buy most of the time is food.
Okay.
And we have the input industries in food, like the seed industries, the medicines, and so on, that also create a lot of jobs. So food drives the economy, and for this reason is something
okay,
that government really takes to be important, and all of us must make it our business, because we need food to be alive and to be able to work and do what we want to do in life.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. And just briefly before I let you go, because if you talk about food, one of those sources of food is animals. So talk to us about how we can make food safe from the perspective of animal, even from the farm level, briefly.
Yes, briefly, we have two major types of food, food of plant origin and food of animal origin. Food of animal origin is actually something that is declared in law, and this is done by the Cabinet Secretary responsible for veterinary matters, now the Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture. And under the Meat Control Act, Chapter 356 of the laws of Kenya, we have a number of animals that are declared as food. And these include cattle, sheep, and goats. We have chickens.
Okay.
We also have donkeys, mules, and horses. And animal production is a huge factor in the safety of food.
Okay.
And there are a number of things we need to pay attention to at the production stage. One of them is the feeding of the animals. The other one is the control of diseases and parasites. And the third one is the environment or the housing of the animal.
Okay.
The other factors that we need to take into consideration are the genetics and the breeding. Inbreeding of animals leads to what we call inbreeding depression, that can make the animal weak, even in terms of immunity,
okay,
and therefore leads to need for antibiotics or treatment.
Thank you, Dr.
The type of production system that is used, we have intensive, we have semi-intensive, and extensive. The problematic one is the intensive one, or the confined one,
okay,
where animals are put in one place, but this happens mostly with animals like the chicken, the pigs, and even cattle in zero grazing.
Okay.
There's an accumulation of a lot of waste, and then there can be microorganisms. So I hope I'll.
Let me just bring in Dr. Kimani at that point, because you mentioned that there are two types or sources of food, which is, and you've spoken about animal, but there's also the plant side. Dr. Kimani, talk to us about making food safe from the plant side.
Thank you very much. On making food safe from the plant side, I think the first step is to understand the sources of contamination and the types of contaminations that are likely to be there in the plants. And starting with the types, we have got several types of contaminations that may be there. You may have heavy metals, such as lead, and other metals that may harm humans. The other one is the microorganisms, the pathogens such as E. coli or Salmonella. And the other ones you may have like contaminations from pesticides and other chemicals in the foods.
Okay.
And these may be there because maybe the environment in which the plants were planted were contaminated, or the animals worked. For example, let's say you are growing something like strawberry, you may have the dogs going to the farm and urinating on the strawberry, and then they are eaten without washing or even without cooking. So you may find they are contaminated.
All right.
And the other sources of contamination is human. For example, people may handle contaminated waste or go to the toilet and they don't wash their hands, and then they come and handle food.
Okay.
So you find that all those, and others are pesticides when they are not used properly. Okay. As per the label.
All right, and we'll come back to how we can use pesticides safely, given the role that they play, of course, in growing plants and crops. But let me just bring in someone else who is also in the value chain. Mr. Ojepat, as the Consortium of Fresh Producers, at what point do you come in, and how do you ensure that the safety that maybe the farmer began, at the farm level continues?
Thanks, Rob. For us, it's very clear that we are what we eat. And definitely, for us to be what we eat, it's important that then the quality of the food that we eat is critical. It's important then that we are able to look at the production chain for the food. And what we've done is to ensure that all our producers produce food in a traceable way. So you can be able to trace the food. And for us, traceability means one step forward and one step behind, that you can be able to account where you got the food from and who you sold the food to. And as the producers, what we're looking at here is to ensure that the sanity and the integrity of the food is maintained along the value chain. Okay. And to ensure that the contamination along the way does not happen. So that when we produce from a smallholder quality in Meru, we should be able to harvest well, we should be able to transport well, we should be able to distribute to our buyers, to the restaurants, the hotels, the institutions, and then be able to ensure that it gets to the table with the integrity that it got from the farm, having ensured that good agricultural practices have been followed. Okay. And critically for us is that we must be able to account for the food that we eat, and that is going to assure us of food security and nutritional security, and for us to then be able to ensure that we have a healthy nation.
Mr. Ojepat, and
lastly, sorry?
Yes, proceed, yes.
I was saying, lastly, at this point in time, what we are looking at here is that as a country, we are grappling with two things: food safety and food security. For too long, we have concentrated so much on food security because people are looking at availability. And food safety has been thrown out of the window or has not been given a lot of attention because this had not come out to limelight. But we thank God for World Health Organization and FAO for setting aside such a day for us to be able to insist that we are safer eating little, which is safe, than more that is unsafe. And that we are what we eat. I insist that we are what we eat today. The health of the person seated next to you is determined by the quality of the food they ate. So we are here committed and ensuring that all our growers in the countryside are now following certain set guidelines for them to be able to produce their food for us as a country and also for the export market.
Thank you, Mr. Ojepat. And Brenda, he raises a very valid point that for a very long time we've always focused on, and I think because of lack of food, we always focus on, can we, ensure food security? And then the other aspect of food, which is the safety, is thrown, to the side. Maybe just talk to us from now a personal point of view. We have followed the value chain from the farm, from the animal farm, or from the farm with Dr. Kimani and Dr. Ochodo, to the fresh producers. Now it is in my house. What happens after that? How do I ensure my food is safe?
So, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to just be able to give views in that space. So, you're talking in terms of I being a consumer.
Yeah.
So, number one, we have to understand who is a consumer in this space. A consumer is that person who purchases a good or service basically to use it in his home. So, meaning that whatever product he's buying or she's buying has already gone through the process, and it's assumed that the food is okay. So one of the things that I need as a person to see when I'm going to purchase my food is, number one, I should purchase my food from a regulated place. When I talk of a regulated place, I'm talking of maybe, even if it's a kiosk, if you buy something and food that is not maybe of nature, you're able to go back, you're able to trace back to where you bought it. If it's a kiosk, if it's a retail shop, or if it's a supermarket, you should be able to trace back. When I talk of the unregulated places, I can give you a very practical example.
Yeah.
Remember the story of the yogurt, the fake yogurt that was being sold to passengers on the Nakuru-Nairobi highway.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you get a problem with that kind of product, you have nowhere to go and really trace back and say that whatever product you bought was not okay.
Yeah.
So you need to buy your products from a regulated place. Number two, I expect also that the foods that are on the market have met the standards. How are the standards being made? As a consumer, I need always to be informed by the regulators, by the government, that
these are the standards.
Yes, the standards are in place, and the standards are being followed. And such a program like this one, which we are on, we are able to re-emphasize that we have standards that are domiciled at the Kenya Bureau of Standards, and we should be able to even as a common mwananchi, you can access the same standards online. Just be able to know what you're taking in is okay. And remember, again, you have a right as a consumer to voice your issues if there's something that is not really right. Remember, we've had previously, there's something that was aired on your station on the white poison and the red alert, the white alert. And of course, that also, it's that consumer who is who wants to know, is the government up to the task, making sure that everything that is going out there is safe enough. Remember, Article 43, 1C and D of the Constitution of Kenya gives every Kenyan the right to adequate food that is safe.
Okay.
And again, water that is also safe. So with that, we cannot run away from that space that me as a consumer, I need to be taken care of. And the Constitution has already recognized that.
Okay. And maybe to bring in Mr. Nyangori at this point, because you've really clearly followed the value chain and the conversation, from Dr. Ochodo to the plants, to the fresh producers, to now the household level. And you as MEST have been playing a very important role in raising this awareness and all that. Just talk to us about the micro enterprises support program Trust itself, and the angle in which the Agrify program now comes into this conversation of the day.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Victor. Micro Enterprise Support Program Trust is a development organization whose main focus is poverty reduction. And what we do at Micro Enterprise Program Trust, we address issues of poverty in 3 or 4 thematic areas. The first thematic area is market access. Victor, you and I know that smallholder farmers in this country significantly contribute to the total agricultural output, yet their returns is not commensurate to what they produce.
Yeah.
So what as MESP does, we look at the market, because the reason why they don't get that return is mainly because the market is disintegrated. So what we do, we look at the market And we ask ourselves in terms of what does the market require in terms of quality and in terms of quantity. So then we work backward, supporting farmers to be able to meet that demand. And that can be in terms of issues to do with certification or issues to do with standard. We support farmers to be able to acquire standards that meets the market. It could be local gap, it could be global gap, or fair trade.
Okay.
We also support farmers in infrastructure, because infrastructure is very key. So that, for example, you support farmers to be able to aggregate, give them infrastructure that can enable them to be able to increase their bargaining power.
Yeah.
And also those infrastructure, aggregation infrastructures also help them in terms of addressing food safety concern. Yeah. And lastly, it also helps them so that the market doesn't go to every household. So the second thematic area that we address is financial inclusion or access to finance. Yeah. So what we do at MESP, we provide wholesale lending through micro-lending institution who then on lend to farmers. And the third thematic area is green transition. We ensure that whatever that the farmer produce along the value chain, that they use environmentally sustainable means. And the last one is productivity and food safety. And we've put these two key together because, Victor, again, you know, you cannot talk about productivity in agricultural intervention. Yeah. You cannot talk about profitability without talking about productivity. Okay. Then what this means is that when farmers are doing production, the tendency to compromise safety and quality is normally very high. Yeah. So in terms of productivity, what we do, we support farmer in terms of technology so that they can produce using less and produce more. Okay. And then two, in terms of safety, we bring all the actors, like now you can see what we are doing now, be it government actors, be it private sector actors, be it consumer, so that each of those actors can play their role effectively.
And I'm very much interested in that bit about ensuring that they get more returns without compromising on safety. Yeah. But that has to be after this quick commercial break. You don't go anywhere because Mr. Nyangori, Dr. Brenda, Ms. Brenda Obura, Dr. Ochodo, Dr. Esther Kimani, as well as Mr. Okisegere Ojapat are staying with me after this commercial break.
Cutting through the market's noise to bring you the real business story.
Who has valued the assets of these 5 state sugar farms? Comparison is made in terms of labor costs. It's a lot more favorable in markets in Asia compared to countries such as Kenya. There is the reality that in Kenya, what are called conservative funds, or those ones which focus largely on government debt, are outperforming those who are in the aggressive side who focus on the more risky assets. Is debt restructuring on the table for you? Are we looking at another capital raise potentially? Let's talk about the quality of companies which are listing. How do we sit with the VAT refunds discussion?
Business Redefined is your go-to point for a 360 degrees coverage on the world of business.
Business Redefined. Comprehensive, rigorous, informative.
Ni swala ambalo limetatiza mafisi wengi. Huenda ikawa anayepiga simu anataka kukula fea, ama msupa amejipa kiro safi. Nduru za kuaminika zimetufikia ya kwamba
to get more mafisi, dial star 811 star 935 hash. Skiza Non-Nation.
Kwetu Mix in association with Coca-Cola.
Introducing Kwetu Mix.
Okay, but don't need no intro.
Tangu tuingie kwa hii mchezo si ndo heartbeat. Nairobi City tunairan kama heartbeat.
If you know, you know.
We have a banger.
Nisho, ni wapi uliniona?
Kwetu Mix on MTV.
Hapo. Tutakuletea updates zote about all the trendy and popular entertainment events. Yes, bana.
Kwetu Mix, keep it locked. NTV, don't touch the dial.
Kwetu Mix in association with Coca-Cola.
You're watching Your World on NTV this morning. Thank you for staying with us. We want to continue our conversation about food safety because it's the World Food Safety Day, and my guests are still with me. Mr. Geoffrey Nyangori is the Food Safety Program Manager at the Micro Enterprises Support Program Trust, MESPT. Ms. Brenda Obura, Head of Division of Food Safety at the Ministry of Health, is also with us this morning. So is Dr. Charles Ochodo, is the Head of Policy and Veterinary Governance at the Directorate of Veterinary Services. He's joining us virtually this morning, and so is Dr. Esther Kimani. She's the CEO of the Pest Control Products Board, as well as Mr. Oki Segere Ojapar, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Fresh Produce Consortium of Kenya. And we want to pick the conversation right where we left it. And let me just start with Dr. Kimani, because Daktari, you will agree with me that pesticides indeed play a very important role in developing food crops and plant-based food, because it protects the food, the crops from pests, and it even helps farmers in destroying weeds that will of course affect the productivity of the food. But it also becomes a problem if we do not use it effectively.
Yes, that is true, and that is why PCPB is here. Pest Control Products Board is a government regulatory agency, and we regulate on behalf of the government the import and exportation of pesticides, manufacture, distribution, and safe handling of the products, and also safe disposal. This is for the protection of animals, human, and also the environment. In doing this, what we do the registration of the pesticides so that only relatively safe products are registered. Why I say relatively is because all chemicals are quite poisonous.
Yeah.
And they have to be registered so that also you evaluate to make sure that the ones you are introducing are not so harmful if handled properly.
Okay.
And so in registering, we do risk assessment. We also regulate on the labeling of those products. And I would encourage farmers and anybody who is handling those products, any chemical products, to ensure that they read the label.
Okay.
Because that label instructs them on how to handle it, on what periods they should wait before they can. For example, let's say you're producing a food like tomatoes or any other product, even coffee or any other. It gives the instruction, how long should you wait before harvesting?
Okay.
Yeah?
All right.
After you have sprayed.
And briefly, actually, yes. Then at that point, because the concern is not that we are using, the concern is how we are using. Is it possible to sort of achieve, a balance of safely using these pesticides without necessarily, harming the consumers?
Now, I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
I think there was
Yes.
a bit of network problem.
I can hear you.
But it's possible to use it because you need to use protective clothes. And I said you start by reading the label on how to use it. Also use protective clothes because those pesticides can harm. Some of them can even enter your body through your skin as you use them. So you use to protect yourself. The other thing we can do also is to really create awareness and training, and I'm glad that we have such a day when we can discuss this issue.
All right, I think we are losing Dr. Esther Kimani there, but let me just go to Mr. Ojepat, because clearly from what Godfrey told us, there's sometimes the incentive, you know, or the feeling of really wanting to compromise on quality because of trying to maximize returns. And that means sometimes if the label is written that you should not harvest, you should harvest at least 2 weeks after you sprayed, there is the motivation to sometimes try and harvest even a week before, because, I mean, you want the money. So maybe from your side as fresh producers, that does sometimes mean, you know, asking people, the farmers, when they last sprayed this, and maybe even testing.
Thanks again. I just want to reinforce that from where we see it, the majority or the larger portion of our time is about training and capacity building the smallholders. And we train and capacity build the smallholders on the use, on responsible use of plant protection products.
Okay.
Where they have to spray. It is also important to note that as growers, we are faced with certain challenges, and the biggest challenge, the challenge that we face is the massive number of smallholders vis-a-vis this short or a drop in the ocean in the number of extension officers that have capacity to be able to fine-tune and to train our people. What therefore is important is that the consumers in this country hold the future of food safety. The reason why I insist that the consumer in this country holds the future of food safety in this country is because of my earlier statement where I said, we are what we eat. The day the consumer in this country starts insisting on the source of their food, it will ensure that there is a drastic change and adjustment along the value chain. Currently, we are training our people. We are encouraging our people to do all they can. But believe you me, the day the consumers start asking certain questions, particularly on the source of the food, what did we spray?
Yeah.
Basically, an accountability of the food we eat. We are poor in doing this as a country. And as a people in this country, we must then be able to hold everybody accountable. When you go to the supermarket, ask the supermarket, where did the food come from? Ask the grocery, where did the food come from? For that reason, the grocery, the supermarket, the hotels, the restaurants, the schools, the hospitals will insist on the growers to ensure that certain patterns happen. Terop, if I can say this, that we have successfully managed to deal with the export market. And this is because of the consumer requirement in the marketplace.
Okay.
In our case in Kenya, we as a people, as I said earlier, have insisted on food availability other than food safety, and are lazy in asking certain questions. Sadly, we end up going to Mama Mboga and we're telling Mama Mboga, nikatie mboga yangu ya shilingi 20, I am on the way coming. You have no idea where Mama Mboga got the skuma wiki or the cabbage that you are asking them to cut.
Yeah.
So what are we doing as the Fresh Produce Consortium? We have insisted that our members are able to then be able to put in place a traceability system that is able to account for the integrity of the product before it gets to the shelf. Two, we have insisted that in an event we do a test and we find your product has slightly more contaminants, which is not from pesticide, because in this country also, we seem to be focusing food safety contamination as if it's only the pesticide issue. We have issues of hygiene. We just careless even how we transport our own food. So the entire system needs to be clear. For example, when you go to the supermarket, and particularly for the ladies, where do they put their vegetable? They end up putting their vegetable inside the same kiondo, or you're putting your vegetables in the booth of the car. You're putting the vegetables anywhere, and that makes it difficult. So what we have done as an association is encourage our people to use responsibly the pesticide, dispose of the containers well, and remain resilient by observing the label. And we now urging that we work, and now we are working together with value chain actors. For example, we are currently working with certain supermarkets and groceries to ensure that they go through a domestic market standard certification that will qualify that the product that goes to the market has been certified, and the system has been certified locally, even before we go to the international standards. And last but not least, what we are looking at here is a position where we are able to speak to the majority of Kenyans through all platforms, including this platform, that, hey, food is our responsibility, not the responsibility of the grower, but the responsibility of all value chain actors, right from the consumer down to the producers, the handlers, the transporters, the distributors, the storage people, the mamambogas in the markets, the county markets. We must all work together. And I like what Brenda said. Finally, can we be very sure that everything you have has been regulated?
All right. Thank you. Brenda, clearly the call is much more on the consumer to lead the charge in protecting yourself, even in the household, right inside my house.
So in that space, before I even answer what the question you asked me, one thing that I forgot to say is as a consumer, again, while you buy your products from the market, ensure you read the label so that you get to know the ingredients. Ensure to get to know the manufacturing date and the expiry date, because in most cases you buy a product, you go home with it. Mostly you find, especially the products that are on offer, you find maybe the expiry date is maybe a week or a month to go, and you're buying a product that you intend to use maybe for another 3 months. So we need to be very careful and sure when you're buying a product, even if it's on offer, how long are you going to keep it in your home? Then from there, back in the house, you have to ensure that we have public health officers have been training consumers out there how to handle foods in their home. And we are using WHO developed way of doing it, and we normally call it the keys. There are 5 keys to safer foods. So the first key tells you that you have to clean, to keep clean. You have to wash. If there are vegetables you've bought, you have to wash them before you cook. You have to clean your area over where you're going to prepare food every other time when you're at home. Then the key number 2 is to separate the raw from the cooked food. If you don't do that, you have cross-contamination in the home, leading to food poisoning. So anytime you've cooked your food, you should have a section within your kitchen where you're keeping the raw food that you're not intending to cook, and for whatever you've already cooked. Then number 3, the key number 3 is making sure that you cook your food thoroughly. And I'm sure Dr. Chodo in this space will agree with me that when we buy meat, we normally say boil it before you fry it, and not just have it halfway cooked. Because we know that there are other issues that can come up in that particular space if you eat meat that is semi-cooked and that kind of thing. Then the 4th key is to store food at safe temperatures. You know, there are different foods have to be stored at different temperatures. If you keep a food that is supposed to be maybe you have to store in a cool, dry place, and you end up keeping the food that's supposed to be in a dry place, you end up putting it in the refrigerator, then you're compromising the quality of that particular food. And then the 5th key is to ensure that you use safe water for cleaning your food. And I'm saying safe, I'm not just saying clean, because safe water means it does not have
It can be clean but not safe.
It can be clean, but it's not safe.
Okay.
And also the raw materials that you're using have also to be from a safe source. And I agree with what Ojepat has just said, that you should be able to ask your mama mboga, your supermarket, where did they source their products from? Because the raw product can actually be the cause of maybe something at the end of the chain. Thank you so much.
Mr. Nyangori, clearly there is a lot of importance that we are now attaching to this food safety thing. But for most farmers, for most food business operators, for most people who handle food, they tend to be very small businesses. And the issue of certification that Brenda is talking about and Ojepat is talking about, and all those issues of sometimes ensuring that the food is safety can sometimes, one, come at a cost, and also be a bit complex because they are not trained. Just talk to us about, do you in any way at least help these small businesses and people who handle food to achieve food safety?
Yeah, thank you, Kiprop. Yeah, our approach has been that food is everyone's responsibility. And I'm happy that Ojepat was able to stress
on that point.
It's not government's responsibility alone. And I think that's the underlying point. And when I talk about everyone, we are talking about three entities here. We have the government, we have the food business operators, and we have the consumer. So in terms of our program, for the government, we have rolled out quite a number of activities. And for the national government, through the regulator, the central competent authorities, the DVS, PCPB, public health, what we do is we have been able to help them have a concerted approach. What that means is they work together as a team. And then for the county government, as you know, that agriculture is devolved, yet there are some functions that are still national. So again, what this program does is to bring the two levels of government, both the national government and the county government, to work together so that they can coordinate matters to do with food safety.
Okay.
And then the third level is with regard to the private sector. For a long time, when you talk about the private sector, whenever they saw the regulators, they were running away. So we've had a kind of a cat and mouse game. But what we are doing as a program is to be able to orient the food business operator to be able to shift this mindset so that they are able to take now the lead role in terms of food safety. And Ojepat has tried to stress that they are, as a food association, they are trying to make sure that they lead the way so that that leaves the government in terms of ensuring that we have proper legal and policy framework in place. And lastly, for the consumer, we just make sure that they are aware about the standards that are required so that they can demand safe food.
Okay.
Thank you.
And let me just go back to Dr. Ochodo at this point, because clearly from the conversation and all the how the people who have weighed in this conversation, from where I sit, it appears like we really, all of us, have to be part of this if indeed we are going to win the war and ensure food safety. Dr. Ochodo?
Hello, Victor? Yes, you can hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you. For the benefit of the viewers, before I answer your question, let me just add that added to the list of food animals that I mentioned earlier, we also have under the Fisheries Management and Development Act a wide range of fish, mollusks like snails and crustaceans that are eaten as food. And we also have the equivalent of the domestic animals, what we call the farmed game, animals like crocodiles and ostriches that we use as food. And Kenyans are also known to eat a lot of undeclared food, things like termites in Western Kenya. We have some larval stages of the dung beetle, some breeds of rats, and certain breeds of millipedes. all this food to Kenyans, and we must then work towards the safety of that food. My fellow panelists have elaborated on food safety at the market stage and at the kitchen stage, but there are certain hazards, harm that might be done to food very early at production and will be very difficult to correct later on in the value chain. And one of these is, of course, the drugs that are used to treat animals and the pesticides that are used to control diseases.
Yeah.
When animals fall sick because of management failures, disease control has not been handled properly, and so on, there is need to treat them. And the treatment can involve use of antibiotics, use of deworming agents, antimicrobials, and other forms of treatment. Normally, when this happens, then we do recommend that a product withdrawal period is observed, so that the milk, for example, is not taken, for example, for 3 days for certain medicines. Meat is not used. And this is where we get problems, because most of our producers are small scale, and they need to depend on the animals for food and a little money that they need to get. Okay. And so when we ask them to discard the milk for some time, they find it very difficult.
Okay.
And therefore, we do stress a few things, and one of them is that the animals must be fed on feed that is safe, free from whatever may harm the animals. And then this will mean that the animals do not need to be treated. 2, they need to apply disease control measures like vaccination against common diseases like foot and mouth disease, and a number of them. We have quite a number in the country, so that then there is no need to use antibiotics and other agents to treat animals. Again, application of pesticides like the ones used to control ticks, mites and fleas. This used to be employed by our farmers. We also encourage our animal producers to observe what we call farm biosecurity measures.
Okay.
And this includes vaccination, as I've mentioned, and also fencing off and controlling visitors, because these can be agents of diseases. So with these prevention measures, then there is less need to use antimicrobials.
Yeah.
And therefore, there is less need to talk about withdrawal of products, which our farmers find to be very difficult.
Okay.
And the need to reduce the use of antibiotics in our animal production system is even made more urgent by the realization that today at least 700,000 people are perishing because of antimicrobial resistance that is, transmitted from animal products down into our food chain.
All right.
And it's estimated by 2050, this number could reach 10 million people.
Yeah.
So it is very important that producers observe all these measures, so that whatever is handed to the market is safe, and then the consumer takes it and handles it, as Brenda said, observing those 5 principles of safer food.
Thank you, Dr.
That way, then we can ensure food safety.
Thank you.
From farm to fork, as it were.
Yeah, let me just bring in Dr. Kimani at this point, because Dr. Ari, part of that problem with food security is sometimes there's a lot of what we call food wastage. And that brings in the perspective of trying to extend, the shelf life of food and even, for instance, issues like milk. But that extension comes with, ingredients or chemicals that we use to extend the food. So maybe my question to you is it possible perhaps to extend the shelf life of food, cut down on wastage, but at the same time, make sure that it's still safe?
Yes, it's possible to extend the shelf life of food. First, during production, you have to make sure that you manage the pests and diseases, because they damage the quality of the products. And you find if an insect came and punctured the skin, for example, of a mango, it encourages other microorganisms to grow in the mango and make it rot. So you find the shelf life of that product is reduced. But if those pests are managed at the farm level, you find that you get quality food that can stay longer when stored after harvesting. The other thing you can do is there are some pesticides or other chemicals that are applied after the food has been harvested, either during processing or during storage. The best thing, as I said, is to make sure that you, for example, let's say you treat your maize against weevils. You must make sure that you observe the time you need to store that product without using it for feed, so that the weevils will have died and the chemical will have broken down to safer products.
Okay.
And it won't harm human beings. But if you just treat and then you serve that food, you can make us harm, either to animals or human beings. Yeah.
All right. Mr. Ojepat, we're running out of time, but I have to ask you this question. In any part of this value chain and food chain, if you as the producer or the seller find out that you have sold unsafe food to consumers, whether it is the chemicals used or it is expired, or I as the consumer find out that I have been sold things that are not safe, what should happen there?
Thanks, ordinarily, the reason why we have systems in place is that you are able to put a recall process and a traceability process to be able to get to know where is the weakest link within the value chain and the distribution, particularly from the farm to the market. A best example will be a scenario where you are supposed to have harvested only from 2 blocks, but by mistake, they went into the farm and they harvested from 3 blocks. What we are encouraging our people to do today is when you harvest produce from a specific block, you then document and transport that produce block by block. So we are able to have that discussion.
Okay.
We are currently working closely with government to be able to ensure that what earlier on was alluded, a cat and mouse chase each other, does not occur. But we have a conversation where best practices and self-regulation by the industry takes the lead.
Okay.
So then government just comes to ensure that quality control is assured.
Okay.
But Rob, because time is running, allow me now that I'm on the floor to just say this.
Yeah.
That the language today in the world on food is about compliancy.
Mm-hmm.
And compliancy will assure safe trade. And safe trade will only happen when we all do what we must do within our space.
Okay.
Food safety is the responsibility of each one of us. That the greed that may be there for the suppliers or the distributors or the consumers to go to the supermarket and say, we do not want to see any product, any spec that has some dotted line. And normally the assumption is that food safety challenges are on pesticide. That needs to be discouraged.
Okay.
The contamination of food can happen at any point, including in the kitchen.
Okay.
And this conversation, I want to appeal to you people within the media, for example, to be able to partner with us, the growers.
Okay.
And I'm happy that Ongori is here to see how our general population is educated on the importance of food safety and the role each one of us has to play in the food safety.
Okay.
Both the private sector, the government, and the development partners have a role. And I want to end by saying, government needs to invest and private sector needs to invest on extension services and knowledge dispensation. And most importantly, remember that we are what we eat.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very important and comprehensive closing remarks by Mr. Ojepat there. Brenda, in your closing remarks, Let me just take you to the point that Dr. Kimani mentioned about, extending the shelf life. This processed food sometimes needs to be treated differently from the fresh food. Just talk to us in general and in your closing remarks about ensuring that safety from that perspective.
Okay. Generally, as Dr. Kimani said, that there's the way that the foods can be extended the lifespan depending on the kind of chemical that has been used. Number one, the chemicals that are being used, we insist they have to be cannot cause any kind of harm to the human beings. Okay. And that brings me now to the point where we have 2 acts that govern us as public health officers. We have the CAP 254, that is the Food, Drugs and Chemical Substances Act, and there are quite a number of chemicals that are, I would call them chemicals because that are used specifically in the space of food, and not only that, even there are food additives that are used that, and we also rely on our international standards that we get from Codex. Yeah. We also have there the chemicals that are permitted to use. We also have the CAP 242 that now, when it comes to handling the hygiene space within food safety, there's quite a lot in that particular act, and I would like to encourage our viewers and every other person, these are documents that are online that can be accessed. And in this space, from where I sit, Minister of Health, let's not forget we still have COVID. That is still a pandemic. Okay. So we need to continue maintaining the physical distance. We still have to continue washing our hands. That is ensuring that the hygiene issues are there. And if anybody is sick, they need also to seek medical attention. Then another thing that I would like to let our viewers know is that we are having a virtual conversation from here. We are not stopping here. We are still having this conversation. We are having a webinar, and we are inviting everybody to join into the webinar so that we can continue discussing this. It's going on today immediately. Are we leaving here?
Where can they find the link?
There's a link that I think Mr. Nyangori will be able to share. Okay. Yeah.
But Mr. Nyangori, before you share the link, then I mean, I'm sure you've seen issues of the regulators, impounding unsafe peanuts with aflatoxin in the shelves. You've seen the issue of blocking maize with aflatoxin from entering the country. Maybe from where you sit, do you think we're winning this war, or at least on course to winning this war of ensuring food safety?
Yeah. Thank you, Victor. I think war is not the correct term. What I would say is we don't use confrontational methods in the matters food safety. And what we do is we have been providing a facilitatory platform where we enable every actor to be able to play their role. And indeed, I can say we are in this to win. And as you can see, we have all the actors together, and all of them are speaking one language. Okay. So with regard to the national government, and which I think we are proud that Dr. Ochodo has been able to lead, we've seen a paradigm shift where now the regulators are shifting to regulating the food business operator as opposed to regulating the food that is, as it were. And that's why we have seen the food business operator like Ojipat, the sector that Ojipat represents, they are now taking it up as their own lead role to be able to do self-check. Okay. And then number two, what we are doing with the county government, we have seen significant commitment, and especially with the county government, the 13 one that we are working with, where they are now laying framework and putting resources to support food safety initiative. Okay. Actually, that is a very great milestone. Okay. And then number three, in terms of the food business operator, and I think, again, Ojipat has eloquently talked about it. Yeah. They are putting in place mechanisms to ensure that the producers, the marketers and the distributors are able to adhere to food safety. Okay. And what we do is we have seen, even through our support, some of the food business operator start doing self-checks. that makes the work of the regulator very easy.
Okay.
Now, where the war need to go more significantly is on the consumer, because again, this is where we still look at the cost as opposed to the quality.
All right.
But again, we will continue providing this kind of platform so that we make sure that farmers are sensitized and they are able to understand the need to shift to food safety. And we have many, many other platforms that we provide, not talk shows alone, radios and others. And lastly, is just to echo what my sister Brenda said, that from there, the conversation will go on. We have like-minded partners, you know, the FOIOs, the SOCA, the Trademark East Africa, MEST, together with other government agencies. We are moving now from here to make sure that the conversation continues, even in the next 7 days.
All right. Where can they find the link?
The link I'll share immediately after this.
All right. Thank you very much. Indeed, we are what we eat, and if it's not safe, then it's not food. That is my biggest takeaway from this conversation. We have been talking about food safety on this World Food Safety Day. Many thanks to my panelists this morning. Mr. Geoffrey Nyangori is the program manager, safety program manager at Micro Enterprises Support Program Trust, that is MEST. Miss Brenda Obura at the head of Division of Food Safety at the Ministry of Health, of course, joining me in studio, and also joining me virtually this morning, Dr. Charles Ochodo, the head of Policy and Veterinary Governance at the Directorate of Veterinary Services, as well as Dr. Esther Kimani, the CEO at the Pest Control Products Board, and finally, Mr. Okisegere Ojepat is the Chief Executive Officer at the Fresh Produce Consortium of Kenya. I have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I hope you do, because we have to wrap it up. And from me and the entire team, it's goodbye from now. We'll see you again tomorrow.